Hello and welcome. Today we are going to take a deeper dive with respect to the process of buying a home and property. We're going to keep things a little more conversational and loosey-goosey today.
Yeah, so hello everyone. We are Matt and Michael from the Webb and Young Group, Remax, Hallmark Che, and again, welcome to the Real Estate Roundtable. Yeah, so we often get asked by clients, hey, Matt, Michael, I want to check out, property on 123 Main Street, and without going through the proper steps and procedures when really diving into purchasing a property. So the first step that we encourage our buyers to do is to speak to a mortgage broker. A mortgage broker is going to assist you with letting you know exactly what you can afford. And to be honest with you, there's some people that can afford a lot more than they were thinking. And on the other side, there's a lot of people who, make good money, maybe have a lot of debt, and really only get pre-approved for a smaller amount, which unfortunately doesn't get them into the home that they want. But yes, that's the first starting point when you are looking to purchase yourself a property or your first home, or even if you're looking to upsize and increasing your mortgage.
Yeah, I think that's really important to know. The last thing you want to do is fall in love with a particular property and then come to realize after the fact, after you've gone through the whole process of negotiating a purchase price, that maybe your lender doesn't want to fund the purchase. Like there's nothing worse than that kind of disappointment. And as you pointed out, Matt, if in speaking to a lender off the hop, maybe you can even afford a little bit more and get a little bit more home for your money as well.
Yeah, for sure. And something that we often see is buyers, once we give them that information, is they just go to their bank. Something that we recommend is that you talk to, your bank is a great starting point, but also there's some great mortgage brokers out there that can really expand the number of lenders that you could use. And most often they could actually get you a better rate than some of the big banks that you're already with.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So, I know that some folks out there, they prefer to deal directly with their bank, and we spoke to this too with Michelle Donahue a few weeks ago when we had her on the show. There are some advantages to working with a broker. When dealing with a bank, they can only sell you lending products that are within their portfolio, the portfolio within the bank. Whereas if you're working with a broker, they have access to a multitude of different lenders, be they the smorgasbord of banks or credit unions or even private lenders. And they can shop your mortgage to everybody to ensure that you're getting not only the best interest rates, but also the best conditions, right? There are conditions when you're taking on mortgage financing. So in our view, it's always better, to work with a mortgage broker. They're going to give you access to a lot more lending options than you would otherwise by going directly to one of the large banks.
Yeah, and we do have those partners at our fingertips for you. So if you're looking for a great mortgage broker, different people that we have working at banks, just let us know. We could set you up in the right direction to make sure that you're fully taken care of.
Yeah, absolutely.
So there's something new, Michael. Maybe you want to talk about this. There was some changes to Ontario real estate
Yeah, the federal act.
The federal act, such as TRESA, which is Trust in Real Estate Service Act, compared to REBA, which was the Real Estate and Business Brokers Act. So did you want to talk a little bit about what that entails?
Yeah, absolutely. So, first of all, I think it's important to note that everyone who practices as a real estate professional in the province of Ontario has to be registered. They have to go through all of the courses. They have to continue, on a 2-year cycle, obtaining more accreditation in order to maintain their license. But in December, so there's a federal act. It used to be REBA, which stood for the Real Estate and Business Brokers Act. And that was replaced in December of 23 with TRESA, which is the Trust in Real Estate Services Act. And so there were some fundamental changes between REBA and the introduction of TRESA. So some of those, and all of these will be explained to you by whatever realtor you choose to engage. In fact, we have to explain some of this to you so that you have a full understanding of what your rights and obligations are under the Act. And again, it's a federal act. In the province of Ontario, it is administered by RECO, the Real Estate Council of Ontario, which is our registrar, and the organization that licensed realtors must be licensed to. So RECO is responsible for administering the Act. They're also responsible for any disciplinary action levied against realtors or brokerages who do not adhere to the Act. But some of the key changes that occurred under TRESA, which again was the act that replaced REBA, was the removal of customer status. So what that means is that you cannot have a customer status now under the new act. You are either going to be a client of a brokerage or you're going to self-represent. And of course, that changes the obligations that a broker and your realtor might have too if for example, you're going to be self-represented. So the introduction of there was also an introduction of designated representation, which would allow a brokerage to assign a specific agent to represent only the buyer or only the seller to a particular transaction, even if they are registered to the same brokerage. This differs from the previous legislation, which allowed for multiple representation under the Act. So the new Act also opened up to sellers the open offer process, which would allow the seller to disclose particular details of competing offers, be they price or conditions, to any other parties who were, offering on that same property.
And we don't often see this.
We don't know. And there are reasons for that. Do you want to explain?
Yeah, and what we find is that sellers do typically, in their best interest, like to keep the price conditions, kind of under wraps. The reason being is if there are competing offers, if they know that they have to maybe only come up, $1,000 per se, or, they only have to drop one condition, it doesn't really benefit the seller so much. So we are still, even though this has been allowed, we are still seeing most sellers, again, I haven't seen disclosure of details in offers. Again, yes, it's probably better for the buyers if they were able to see this, but it's the sellers who are trying to get the most out of their property. So we don't often see this right now in Ontario.
Yeah, since the introduction of the new act, I haven't done any deals where a seller has been willing to disclose the contents of a competing offer. To your point, I mean, it's not really to the seller's advantage. Having said that, I suppose that there might be, particular scenarios where, depending on a seller's motivation, they might be willing to disclose particular details just to expedite the process.
But often when we do see this, the buyers who are putting the initial, excuse me, the buyers that are putting the initial offer forward, we're often seeing a condition with that if there are competing offers, they want to remove their offer in the first place because they don't want to compete and they don't want their price or their conditions presented to other buyers. So again, we're just not really seeing the benefits for anyone in this case. So we don't see it. Like Michael said, he hasn't seen this, and I haven't seen this either with the transactions that I've done.
Yeah. I suppose, it was introduced as a modality to introduce transparency, but in my view, I don't see a real benefit for either party.
Yeah, totally agreed.
So under the new act, there was also an update to the code of ethics. And so that's the code that all of us licensed, realtors must adhere to. So the code of ethics is now significantly more concise and focused, with technical requirements being moved to regulation. The new act also strengthened RICO's powers, and again, RICO is our governing body, and the organization to whom we are all registered in the province of Ontario. So the act further enhanced disciplinary powers of RICO to handle such things as breaches of the legislation, and the ability for RICO to revoke or impose conditions on registration.
For sure. So with this, what Michael and I, we're just kind of doing this loosey-goosey right now, and I know that some of you are probably like, okay, well, this is boring.
It's boring for us too.
The stage that we're at is before you can view a property, mortgage broker is the number one step. Then with a licensed real estate agent, you'll be going through a RICO information guide. And in this RICO information guide, this is the information that you will obtain. The real estate agent will go over all of this with you. And if you agree to these terms, which it's pretty simplistic, to be honest, you would sign off on that. And then what we could do is go over a buyer's representation agreement.
Yeah. So what Matt's referring to is the RICO Buyer's Guide, which kind of explains your rights and obligations under the new act. And this is all in an effort to provide greater transparency, such that you have a better understanding of what your rights and obligations are under the act, and similarly, so that you have a better understanding of what our obligations are to you as a consumer.
So it's in plain English, where before the changes were made, there was another form that had to be signed, and it had a lot of jargon in there that was written by lawyers, and it wasn't very clear for the average customer.
The average consumer, yeah, absolutely. So we've talked a little bit about the RICO, the information guide. We've talked a little bit now about who RICO is, and that they are our regulator and responsible for administering the federal act in the province of Ontario. So let's make a couple of assumptions here. You've already spoken to a lender. You've now had a conversation with a realtor, and you're prepared to engage that realtor to help you find your dream home, and act on your behalf in terms of the writing of contracts and taking you out to see properties and so on and so forth. So, part of that process in engaging a realtor is going to be a requirement for you to sign a buyer representation agreement. And so that's a contract between yourself and the brokerage. You're not signing this agreement with an individual realtor. You're signing this contract with the brokerage that employs that realtor. And so this is a really important document. And not only does it contractualize your obligations to your brokerage of choice, but it also contractualizes that brokerage's responsibilities to you. And so, do you want to talk about some of the things that you might see, or what the effect of that buyer representation agreement is, and what it kind of identifies?
Yeah, for sure. And you know what? Just to backtrack a little bit, I know as a potential buyer, it could be stressful. You feel like you're signing your life away just to see a property, right? So sometimes we just go on whatever, realtor.ca, see a house. We just want to see that house. We don't want to get into a contract per se. But real estate agents are not to show you a property without this in place. Without this in place, you are known then as a self-represented party. So we can't provide any insight or any assistance to you whatsoever. So key points that would be in a buyer representation agreement would be the contract period. So that's negotiable. I understand that, a real estate agent might want to be able to show you properties for 3 months, 6 months, but that's totally negotiable. Also, the property, if you maybe just want to see one property, that could also be in there. Or it could be a variety of properties, but they have to be anything like a detached home to a condominium to land. All that has to be spelled out in there. Also, the location of where the property is. Mm-hmm. So hypothetically, let's say that you were in a contract with our brokerage, with Michael. You want to check out detached properties, in Simcoe County. But then you said, hey, you know what? I also want to buy a condominium in Toronto. That contract doesn't hold you liable to go with another agent to look at a property in Toronto because it's all how it's spelled out in the agreement.
Yeah, it doesn't bind you to the brokerage that you initially. So under buyer rep agreement, one of the things I think what you're trying to say is it identifies the scope of your work together, both in terms of jurisdiction, the region in which you're shopping, and what types of properties you're shopping for.
100%. Sorry if I didn't make that more clear.
No, that's all right.
Thanks for assisting with that. There's also something within the agreement that's called a holdover period. I find this is probably one of the items in the agreement that we get questioned the most about. So what this entails, and what Michael and I would typically do, is put this for a 60-day holdover period, sometimes up to 90 days. So this is a way for a brokerage really to cover their own bottoms. So how this works is, let's say that you went and saw a house 123 Main Street. Your agreement is expired with your current agent, and you determine afterwards, hey, you know what? I'm going to just do a door knock on 123 Main Street, talk to the homeowner, and say, hey, I don't have a real estate agent anymore. Let's make a under the table deal here and keep our real estate agents out. So it's a way for the brokerages to ensure that they are covered. So commissions are paid for the hard work that your real estate agents have done.
Yeah, and that would only be applicable to any properties that that agent or that brokerage under your buyer rep agreement had introduced you to prior to either the cancellation or the natural expiration of that agreement.
Exactly. So layman terms, you see 123 Main Street with your real estate agent. You put an offer within that 60-day period after expiration or cancellation of the agreement, a commission needs to be paid. On the other side, you were working with an agent. You never saw 234 North Street. With your agent, your agreement is terminated, canceled, but you never saw, like I said, the property with that agent. No commission on that property would need to be paid to your buyer rep. Tongue-tied a bit there.
Right.
Okay, so it also goes over the responsibilities to pay commissions to the brokerage. In a buyer representation agreement, it will say that, the commissions can be paid, and most often we do see this in Ontario, by the seller. But that being said, if there's a shortfall, if they decide that they don't want to pay a commission, then an understanding by the buyer that you will pay the commissions to your buyer rep.
Yeah.
So, and that being said, is even though you sign this off, there would be something else which we'll discuss later on called a co-op agreement. So this would all be spelled out before you put an offer on a property.
Right. But, one thing that, might be noteworthy to mention, despite the fact that you might have signed, and, again, as you pointed out, we'll get to that, the confirmation of cooperation and representation. Under the buyer rep agreement, as Matt noted, there is a section that does speak to the commissions that would be owed to that buyer rep. And so for all intents and purposes, so for example, if you've purchased a home and there's insufficient funds left in the net proceeds from the sale of that home, granted, the seller might be responsible for paying those commissions, but if there's insufficient funds left from the proceeds of the sale of that home, the responsibility to pay the buyer representation commission falls to the buyer under this buyer representation agreement.
Indeed. So I would say those are really the meat and potatoes of the buyer representation agreement.
Right.
So hypothetically, you've signed that, you're weighing to work with, Michael and myself. The next stage is seeing a bunch of properties. So
that's the fun part.
That's the fun part. So what we're seeing now is a lot of buyers, they do a lot of their own digging, their own homework. They check properties. I have clients that check properties daily on realtor.ca, for instance, and they advise their real estate agent, hey, I want to see such and such properties. What we suggest is that you don't see any more than 4 properties in a day. We find that's a little bit overload. Mm-hmm. So that's one way as well. What we do on our back end is we're looking at exactly, what type of property you're looking for. Does it have an attached garage? Does it need 3+ bedrooms, 2+ baths? Do you want acreage? Do you want to be in Oro Medonte? Do you want to be in Barrie? Are you open to a variety of areas? We can put all that information into our system and then send you out emails when those properties come up for your viewing. And that's another way that we can check out properties. And of course, people also do drive-bys, see for sale signs as well, and think that, maybe they want to see a property. So you're with Michael and myself. We see a property that's of interest. The next stage would be to put an offer together on that property. So the confirmation of cooperation representation, what does that entail, Michael?
So this industry is all about transparency, right? And it's all about ensuring that all parties to the transaction know, their rights, their obligations, who's getting paid what, how much they're getting paid. So the confirmation of cooperation and representation is a document that accompanies the agreement of purchase and sale, which we'll discuss in a moment. but it's a document that identifies who is representing who and in what capacity with respect to a particular transaction. And it is transactional. So, for argument's sake, if you were to go through the process and offer on a property and it didn't come together and you found a subsequent property, you would be going through the same steps with regard to the confirmation of cooperation. It is specific to that property and that particular transaction. So again, it outlines who's representing who and in what capacity. So in what capacity we would be representing our buyer. It would identify the buyer's agent's brokerage. Similarly, on the other side, it would identify what brokerage is representing the seller, what agent of that brokerage was representing the seller, in what capacity. It also, and when I say capacity, I mean, are they self-represented individuals? Is there client representation in place? It also identifies what the cooperating brokerage. So the cooperating brokerage on a buyer end would be the brokerage representing you as the buyer. So it also identifies how much that cooperating brokerage is getting paid to represent you by the seller. The seller indirectly, or the seller directly, the listing brokerage indirectly.
Yeah, 100%. And remember that all this documentation that is prepared by your real estate agent, they have to, but some don't, go over all of this step by step with you so you totally understand what you're signing before you sign it. So
absolutely,
this goes hand in hand when you are presenting an offer, also known as an agreement of purchase and sale. So within the agreement of purchase and sale, it starts with, the date that the offer is getting put in place. It will go through your information, the seller's information, the property, with as well as the initial price that you would like to offer on the property. Goes in a little bit of detail later on. As well, that, if this is assigned back and forth, that, the crossed off portion supersedes what is already in the contract. We also go over a Schedule A as well. In the Schedule A, that will go over different conditions for the property. It could be anything, for rural properties like a septic pump out, a septic inspection, a home inspection, financing conditions, home insurance condition that allows you to ensure that the home can be insured appropriately. There are a plethora of conditions, if you have a strong real estate agent, that will put in there to make sure that you are fully covered in your transaction.
We'd also, sorry to interrupt, Matt,
Yeah.
Aside from conditions too, but some of the items that we would include in the Schedule A, which accompanies the meat and potatoes of the agreement of purchase and sale, would be other things like warranties and representations that we would want the seller to offer you as the buyer. So certain warranties and reps, for example, that might speak to the condition of chattels, the refrigerator and stove and washer and dryer, that they're going to be in good working order at the time of closing. And if, for example, there's a pool on the property, we would want to include all kinds of warranties and reps with regard to the condition of the pool and the functioning of the related equipment, to protect you as the buyer.
Yeah, and within the agreement as well, actually, that brought up a good point there, is there's also inclusions and exclusions. So fixtures, how I like to talk to my clients about fixtures. If you were to turn the house upside down, give it a shake, what would fall, to the ceiling and what would remain? So if something is affixed to the wall, and it could be anything from like a Dyson vacuum to
Shelving
to a picture that was, or artwork that was put up with screws. It could be a plethora of things.
And bathroom mirrors too, right? Like, we have over the course of the years in this business, run into issues where a bathroom mirror has not necessarily been a fixture because it hasn't been affixed to the home.
Yeah, it was more like put up like a
With a picture hook.
so you could just kind of lift it
Yeah.
up and take it with you.
So it's really important with that in mind to clearly identify, what are chattels and what are fixtures. And, under the agreement of purchase and sale, the assumption is that you have to negotiate the chattels in the agreement. The assumption is that all of the fixtures in the home are included in the purchase price unless otherwise noted. So, it becomes really important to, be a little bit persnickety and clearly identify in the agreement of purchase and sale what our chattels are being included. So those things, as Matt pointed out, would be, things that are easily removed if you give the house a good shake. Washer, dryer, refrigerator, stove, that kind of stuff, versus the items that are affixed to the home, like shelving units and the like. So it's really important to identify, particularly with fixtures, because again, the assumption is that those fixtures are included unless otherwise noted.
Yeah. And really going back to chattels, something that's really important to put for the chattels, like Michael was saying, in regards to like the fridge, stove, washer, dryer, those things, it's good to put in a little bit more detail, such as, the brand name, or as per seen on such and such date, or as in the MLS agreement. We haven't had it per se, but I've seen other agents who have, had their clients duped in a sense where, when their clients went for a showing, had the belief that refrigerator was going to be the stainless steel Bosch refrigerator that was there when they saw the property. When in the agreement it was just said refrigerator, and those sellers went out and switched it for a no-named white refrigerator of their choice and took the
cheaper
refrigerator with them. So your agent needs to be detailed with the information they provide in the agreement of purchase and sale as well.
Absolutely. So it's with all that said, it's really important to partner with the realtor who is detail oriented and is going to write an offer that that not only protects your interests in terms of warranties and representations, contractualized warranties and reps of the seller to you as the buyer, but to clearly identify, things such as fixtures and chattels. One other thing to note too that we didn't mention with respect to the agreement of purchase and sale is that we would also need to identify the proposed closing date as well in the agreement of purchase and sale. And this document is fluid, incidentally, until such time as everyone has signed the confirmation of acceptance. This document can bounce back and forth between sellers and buyers multiple times until you finally land on a binding agreement.
Yeah. So what Michael was saying there too is, within the first offer presentation, the date of closing is very important. And again, this could be negotiated back and forth between the buyers and sellers. Sorry, I keep having to play with my ears today.
It's in ears.
With that as well, a deposit. So deposits are needed. Sometimes the seller has a certain amount that they would like. Again, that could be negotiated. It can also be negotiated of how long the buyer wants to take to provide that deposit as well.
Sure. And, we can negotiate deposits. There have been situations, throughout the course of my time in practice where We might offer a smaller deposit upon acceptance, and an additional deposit upon the fulfillment of conditions, right?
Yeah.
So there's a bunch of things that we can
Yeah,
can
and it also really depends on the market that you're in.
Absolutely.
In the apocalypse days there, when the market was super hot during the pandemic, the sellers really wanted to ensure that they weren't going to again be duped by the buyers, so they were asking for a higher deposit at that time. And at that time, it was typically really 5% of the purchase price. Now, because it's not as busy of a time for real estate, we're seeing those come down. I would say, on average, depending on the price of the house, I think the minimum right now would probably be about $10,000 for a deposit, but
it all kind of depends on the value of the home, right?
It really does. And then you have a higher end home, a luxury home, and you could see anywhere from 50, 100,000 deposit. Yeah. And this just shows trust that the buyer, you as the buyer, have the finances to be able to close the deal.
Yeah, also with contract law, there has to be consideration, right? So a contract is only binding if there is consideration, and that consideration in the world of real estate is the furnishing of a deposit. So in order for that contract to be binding, there needs to be consideration exchanged.
Yeah, for sure. So let's discuss FINTRAC right now. So FINTRAC, Financial Transaction and Reports Analysis Center of Canada, and our obligation to the federal government to act as their agents to corroborate your identity and potential risk. So as real estate agents, what you'll be asked to provide, we have to identify and see some sort of government ID, such as a driver's license. We have to meet you in person. We also need to go over what your employment, your current job position is. And then they also ask us questions to try to determine, again, if you're a potential risk to the government.
Yeah, I know. So I know it's weird. So throughout the course of any real estate transaction, the federal government, your realtor becomes an agent for the federal government. And so we are obligated under federal law to corroborate your credentials. And it's all part of the government's anti-laundering, anti-terrorism initiatives. So we need to be able to complete documents that you don't see, incidentally, but we do need to ask you for your identification, government-issued ID, as Matt had mentioned, photo ID, so that we can fill out this paperwork for the federal government, basically attesting to the fact that yes, we have met with you. Yes, we can support the fact that you are a Canadian citizen. No, we don't believe that you're a terrorist. No, we don't believe that you're laundering money. And so there's this enormous process that we have to, that we're legally obligated to undertake on behalf of the federal government. So when you're asked for your identification, and you're going to be asked for this right up front when we start preparing an offer for you. The reason is that we have now become an agent of the federal government. We need to attest to the fact that you are who you say you are, and that the risks, and identify what we feel the risks might be to the government.
Yeah, I know some people, to be honest, don't love to provide this information. That being said, it's mandatory if you are selling or purchasing a property.
Absolutely.
All right, so let's discuss. So we did talk about the deposit. I know we're kind of all over the place in a sense here. The deposit.
We did warn you that we were going to be loosey-goosey.
We are going to be loosey-goosey. But there is a difference between the deposit and the down payment. So the deposit is, I'm going to say typically, but that's not fair. But if it's at a brokerage, it is held in trust to make sure that money is held until the closing date.
Yeah, and that deposit does come off your purchase price, or what, it doesn't come off the purchase price per se, but it does come off of the amount that you would owe to the seller through your lawyer on closing. It's factored into the balance, the remaining amount owing on closing.
Yeah, and the down payment, that is
Between you and your bank.
you and your bank, and that's typically done like a couple days or so before the closing date.
Yeah. So the important thing with the down payment, however, is that it needs to be significant enough, in our view anyway, to keep you out of the hands of CMHC. So in Canada, if you have a high ratio mortgage, which would be if your equity position in that home was less than 20%, that's considered high ratio mortgage. And the mortgage then under law needs to be insured either through, CMHC or Genworth. And there is a premium attached to that. So that's certainly something you're going to want to consider, and have those conversations too with your mortgage broker, because it will affect your buying power.
Yeah, and we understand that's easier sometimes said than done, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like if you're looking at 20% of a $500,000 house, that's having a down payment of $100,000.
Yeah.
Not everyone can do
It's
that.
not always doable. I mean, and that's not to say that you can't, have a high ratio mortgage. You just need to understand what your exposure is and what the costs are going to be.
Yeah, and that's what, again, when a good mortgage broker, again, that we have in our back pocket, can talk about all the different options and which option works best for you. Sometimes it might just be 5% down to get you into a home because it makes more sense than renting, right?
Yeah.
But if you do have more that you've saved up over time, there's also some benefits to that as well.
Absolutely. And so to clarify, the deposit amount is what you are going to provide either to a lawyer or to the listing brokerage with the acceptance of your agreement of purchase and sale. And so that money would be held in trust. The down payment is the remaining amount that you would owe on the closing of that property, with your lender furnishing the rest. So the down payments between you and your lender. The deposit is the amount that is between you and the agents involved.
Perfect. Okay, so now let's go back in some steps of where we're at in the transaction. So we've started off with meeting with a mortgage broker. You've gone over the RICO information guide. You have signed your buyer representation agreement. You have checked houses. You're ready to put an offer on the house. You've gone over the co-op form. You have the agreement of purchase and sale. The sellers and yourself have negotiated. You've come up with a deal. Within your contract, within your agreement, you're more than likely going to have conditions. Let's talk about a home inspection condition. Typically we see, again, typical, this could change, could be negotiated, 5 business days, 10 business days to get a home inspection done. Again, hypothetically, you get your home inspection done. You're happy with the home inspection. We can remove that condition. We can either, it's called waive a condition, or we can do a notice of fulfillment. We might also have a condition on financing where your bank or your mortgage broker wants to review the agreement before they sign off that they're willing to provide those funds to you. Hypothetically, we say, yep, your mortgage broker says you're okay. Let's remove those conditions. All the conditions that we have on there, you're happy with, they have been removed. You now have firmed up the sale of your home.
Mm-hmm. If I could just interject 1 second.
Sure.
So you had mentioned a finance condition, and this is going to be really important. Mm-hmm. So it's imperative, unless you're independently wealthy, to include a finance condition in your agreement of purchase and sale. And the reason being is that if the home that you've just purchased doesn't appraise out, so when you buy a home, you presumably, unless of course you're independently wealthy, you're going to be mortgaging this home. Yeah. You're going to be borrowing money to purchase this home. And so including a finance condition is imperative, because if the bank determines, and the likelihood is that they're going to order an appraisal on this home that you've just purchased. If the appraisal of that home that you've just bought doesn't support how much money you've asked to borrow from your lender, they're either not going to advance those mortgage funds to you, or there's going to be an expectation that you have to come up with a difference. So if you are purchasing a home without a financing condition, and it doesn't appraise out, you're going to find yourself in a lot of hot water, and potentially sued by the seller.
Yeah, 100%. So we would go over all that with you, myself and Michael. We ensure that that goes into our offers, amongst other things. And we could go over a bunch of different conditions and warranties, but it's really dependent individually on your circumstance, but it's also really depends on the property that you're purchasing, of what type of conditions we would recommend that go in there.
Yeah, absolutely.
So now we have a firm sale on the property that you're purchasing, and then we have a closing date. So something that Michael and I also put in there is we want to see the property. I say at least 2 times, sometimes it's 3 times, depend on the size of the property, before closing. So I recommend the first one to be done really anytime that you want. It might be for, furniture, placement, to determine like what colors you want to paint the house. It's really just going in there for the feel. This is not a home inspection. We can't bring a home inspector in there, try to find some other issues with the place. That part is already done. But then what I recommend and what we recommend is that before you meet the lawyer, which is typically a week to a few days before closing, we do the final walkthrough. The final walkthrough, we're being a little bit more, I wouldn't say picky, but our eyes wide open, looking at the ceiling, making sure that there's no leaks, no water on the ground, making sure none of the shadows have been, switched out, making sure there's no damage per se, making sure all those reps and warranties that the seller said that they were going to do are completed appropriately at that time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
And with that, there has been instances where stuff has been found in the final walkthrough. We provide that information to your lawyer, and then what they can do is they can negotiate a holdback to ensure that those issues are taken care of, hopefully before you move in, but at least after you move in, and you're not on the hook for those.
Definitely.
Yeah, so then I think we're at the lawyer stage. The lawyer so Remax, who we work with, we either provide all that information to the lawyer, so it's not like you have to provide them a plethora of documentations. We also have administration team here that will also provide the information to both lawyers, the buyer's lawyer and the seller's lawyer. They'll have all that and prep before you meet them, and your lawyer is going to go over everything in the documentation, make sure that you're happy with, that the down payment is already taken care of on your side. They're going to go over as well, that the property is, zoned and permitted how it should be. They're going to do all the behind the scenes to make sure that you're safe when purchasing their property.
Yeah, and do things like registering, new title and all that kind of stuff, doing all the background checks on the property to make sure that there's no, outstanding liens registered against the property, either construction liens or tax liens or what have you. So they're going to be doing a very thorough search on any instruments that are registered against the property, and ensuring that there's no impediments, against the property that would interfere with your quiet enjoyment of that property. So Matt, let's talk a little bit about when we actually engage a lawyer during the process.
I know this could change between agent and and client. I know we often have clients who are already going through the offer presentation. They don't have a lawyer in place at that time. That's okay. We can get a lawyer afterwards. I personally like to try to get that information done as soon as possible. We have some great lawyers as well that are in our back pocket that we could provide if you need a lawyer. Like to do that introduction. I like to do that introduction, quite quickly. Mm-hmm. That being said, there is a requisition date that the lawyers have to obtain all that information by. So we want to at least give them enough time to be able to work on your file and not have it last minute.
Yeah. So typically speaking, lawyers aren't going to start a file or open a file until they've got a fully accepted agreement. Because of course, it's the minute they open a file, you're going to start incurring costs. So we typically don't engage a lawyer until we've got a firm and fully accepted agreement. Yeah. Having said that, there are some exceptions though. So if we've got a more complicated property, say for example, we're representing you on the purchase of a farm property, we might want to include in that agreement a solicitor's review condition, where they have an opportunity in advance of you firming up that purchase, to do a deeper dive into any impediments that might work against you in terms of your ability to do what you want with that property. So, but typically speaking, in a regular, residential type transaction, we don't generally engage a lawyer until after we've got a fully accepted agreement.
Yeah, I would say the other case would be if you're looking to purchase a condominium. Mm-hmm.
That's a great point.
Yeah, that would be one that we would want to obtain the status certificate. Yeah. From the condo board. We would ask again a lawyer's review of that status certificate. That just allows them to make sure that there's enough funds.
That the condo corp is healthy and you're not going to get caught with a giant bill
before they sign off. So that would be another instance where we would get get a lawyer involved before the deal firms up.
Yeah.
But yeah, Michael's correct. Like detached properties, cookie cutter type of homes per se, it would be after the agreed upon deal and the property is firmed up before we would reach out to a lawyer. We would also on our end find out from the sellers, you guys are the buyers, as well, who their lawyer is. We would provide that information to your lawyer. I know all this stuff can sound complicated. I know we've been talking for quite a while here, but realistically, if you're working with good real estate agents, it actually becomes a really smooth process that we assist you with a lot of the work. So it's not as stressful as maybe we're making it out to be here.
Yeah, I mean, if you partner with with a good agent, then we deal with all the minutia behind the scenes, and oftentimes you really don't have anything to worry about.
Yeah, for sure. So everything is signed by you with the lawyers. The sellers have done the same. When do you get the keys? So closing date, let's say it's March the 1st, 2026. I hope that's actually a weekday. Typically, it'll be a weekday closing. I don't have a calendar in front of me, but more ideally, I like to recommend between like a Tuesday and a Thursday just to be safe. Closing date, the lawyers are going to be communicating back and forth between the buyers and the seller's lawyer, making sure everything is complete and that the funds from the buyer are going over to the seller. Once all that is done, that is when you'll get a phone call, an email that you can get the keys. So getting the keys now, it used to be, I remember when, I used to buy and sell properties, you'd actually have to go to the lawyer's office, hope the lawyers were there, pick up the keys, and then, open up the front door of your new home. Really, since the pandemic, that has changed, and now you'll get a lockbox code that will be provided from the seller's agent to their lawyer to your lawyer, and they'll give you a code to get into that lockbox to acquire your new home.
Absolutely. And, one noteworthy point before we all let you get back to your day, it's really important that when your lawyer notifies you that that your property is closed and congratulates you, that you get over there as quickly as you possibly can to do one final little inspection. Make sure that all the chattels work, that nothing has been swapped out in the move. Because the warranties and reps are only good up until the day of closing. Mm-hmm. So if you don't get over to your new house for 2 days after closing, then you're kind of SOL. If you find out that the refrigerator is not working, it's kind of too bad, so sad. There's really no recourse.
Yeah, exactly. So there are the steps in long form. We'll have some quicker notes that are on our post as well here for you. But those are the steps when buying a home. Again, it's not that challenging per se, but knowledge is power. So thanks again. If you guys have any questions, we're Matt and Michael from the Webb and Young Group, Remax Hallmark Che Realty, and we're always here to answer questions. If you want us to assist you in any way in your real estate journey, please feel free to reach out. Again, this is our YouTube channel. Please share, please subscribe, please like. Let people know that you love our show. I think that's it. Awesome. Yeah, we're a little bit more low key today, but thanks everyone for joining, and have yourself a good one.
Take care, everyone.
Okay, bye-bye.